Good morning, everyone. I hope you're off to a good start to your day. Today we are looking at Isaiah chapter 14. We read chapter 14 yesterday. We talked about the fact that this particular chapter is the conclusion to the message that God sends through Isaiah to the people of Babylon, as well as at the end of chapter 14, a message to the Philistines, to the people of Philistia. So today, let's look at 3 lessons from chapter 14. The first one that I've found is there in the first 3 verses of the chapter. You have the statement being made in verse 1, "For the Lord will have mercy on Jacob and will still choose Israel and settle them in their own land. The strangers will be joined with them, and they will cling to the house of Jacob. Then people will take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel will possess them for servants and maids in the land of the Lord. And they will take them captive, whose captives they were, and rule over their oppressors." The point that God is making here is that in spite of everything, with everything else that is going to happen with the people of Israel and all of those things, God still chooses Israel. They are still his chosen people for his chosen purposes. And so because of that, Babylon is going to fall. Babylon is going to be overtaken. Chapter 13 says it's going to be overtaken by the Medes. And that is going to take place. But you know what else is going to happen? Israel is still going to exist. Israel is going to exist after the time that Babylon exists, or that Babylon goes into extinction as a major power. And that's exactly what we're going to see in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah when the children of Israel are allowed to return back to the homeland, to come out of captivity and to be able to reestablish society. They aren't going to be the free kingdom that they once were. They are going to be under the footprint of the Medes and the Persians and later the Greeks, though they will have smatterings of independence from time to time in the course of the next few hundred years. But the fact of the matter is, God is still going to keep his promise to the children of Israel, and even with everything that they have done, Israel is still going to remain, and they are still going to remain a viable people even after Babylon is gone. So the first lesson that I think we need to learn from chapter 14 is the fact that God sticks with his people. God continues to remain with Israel even when they needed to be disciplined, even when they needed the judgment that God is going to provide. God is still going to retain his promises and retain his place among his people. The second thing that I want us to pull out of chapter 14 comes from verse 12. And it is actually, to some degree, a correction of what many people believe when they hear this particular phrase. He says, "How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations." When you hear the name Lucifer, most people who use that name or who recognize that name will recognize it in the connotation of people using it as a name of Satan. But that's not the way it's being used. When they call Satan Lucifer, it's actually a hearkening back to this statement in Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. And yet this statement in Isaiah 14:12 isn't about Satan. The context, if you go back up to verse 4, is that it is being said about the king of Babylon. The reference here isn't to Satan. The reference here is to the king of Babylon and the fall of Babylon. The things that are going to transpire and how rapidly and how quickly the light is going to be snuffed out of the Babylonian Empire. As a matter of fact, the city, the capital of Babylon, history tells us is going to fall in a single night. It's going to be snuffed out just like that. And so when you get to this particular section, we need to recognize that Here, God is not calling Satan Lucifer as though that is his name or something along those lines, but rather, and the term Lucifer means day star, but rather he is talking about the king of Babylon when he makes this particular statement, and we need to recognize it as such. In the third place, when you examine chapter 14, I am drawn to the statements at the end of the chapter, beginning in verse number 28 and going down through verse 32 to the Philistines. Because when you see this particular statement, you can just kind of see in the background of things the way that the Philistines would be reacting. Verse 28 gives us the background for it and says, "This is the burden which came in the year that King Ahaz died." So King Ahaz is going to die. It's actually going to be his son Hezekiah who is going to take the throne in his place. Ahaz, remember, is the bad king of Judah during the days of Isaiah. The other kings were described by God as being good. But you have the statement in verse 29. He says, "Do not rejoice, all you of Philistia, because the rod that struck you is broken. For out of the serpent's roots will come forth a viper, and its offspring will be a fiery flying serpent." When King Ahaz dies, the Philistines are in a place where they are rejoicing because evidently King Ahaz was a major thorn in their side. They did not like King Ahaz. And so they are going to rejoice at the death of their enemy. And God says, don't rejoice because the rod that struck you is broken. It's going to get worse. It's going to be followed up by even greater difficulty for you. And he is going to talk about the different things that are going to come. And the fact that the Philistines are going to be dissolved. They are going to be destroyed. And they will not remain. And so rejoicing at the fall of one of their enemies is not going to be something that is going to help them in the long run. And the lesson that I think we need to take from that is sometimes we get caught up in rejoicing at certain things that we feel are detrimental to us or things of that nature. Or maybe even making it be the fact that we rejoice in something that we shouldn't, as far as that goes, in some kind of malady or in some kind of bad thing that befalls somebody that we think deserves it. And yet that's not the way that we need to respond. That doesn't benefit us at all. As a matter of fact, you get one enemy out of the way, and there's always another enemy behind. There's always somebody else to fill the void or to take their place. And that's what God's kind of illustrating to the Philistines, is he said, hey, you're rejoicing at somebody who was a thorn in your side, being out of the picture. But the ones that are coming later are even worse. They're even greater. They're even stronger, and they're going to destroy you. We need to recognize that there is a distinction between not liking what somebody does and between rejoicing in things that befall them. Under the New Testament system, we are told that we need to pray for our enemies, that we need to love our enemies, that we need to be ones who are looking for ways to teach and to reach out to our enemies. That needs to be a foremost thought, not rejoicing or taking pleasure in the evil that befalls them because of their deeds and because of their actions. So there's a few things that I have pulled out of chapter 14. I hope they are things that are beneficial to you, and I hope that you have found some things as well, maybe even things beyond this, that you can pull from this particular text. But most of all, I hope you have a good day, and we'll see you tomorrow.